right? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Saint Therese. Saint Anthony Marie Claret. That's today's feast today. You can look him up later. Did anybody read the apostolic exhortation? Did you enjoy it? I think it's a great summation of what we've been talking about. Yeah, if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. So we're at chapter 5 today, After the Grace of Christmas, 1886 to 1887. She begins by saying, I love this line, I didn't do any housework whatsoever. Talk about a spoiled brat, my goodness. I didn't do any housework whatsoever. So she said that she does do some chores and really favors for that, like she talks about moving Celine's plants from outside to inside, and she says that she's doing them for God alone. But, there's that but, she still expected acknowledgement for it, and she still expected thanks from others. And if they didn't notice, and if they didn't thank her, she says she became unhappy and proved it by my tears. So she goes on a crying jag if she's not acknowledged for what she did. And how true is that? When we do something, we want to be acknowledged. When we do something nice for someone, we want to be acknowledged for it. And it's hard to teach ourselves not to seek after that, or not to drop the hints, or anything like that. She describes this crying that she goes through as a terrible fault, and she describes herself as being very touchy, very sensitive. Any little trouble she caused anyone would make her cry, and then she would cry because she cried. So she's obviously stuck in a cycle, and she's still quite immature at this point, though she's probably 13 or approaching 14 years old. And then she describes that miracle that makes her grow up in an instant, the miracle of Christmas 1886. And she says, since that night, I have never been defeated in any combat, but rather walked from victory to victory, beginning, so to speak, to run as a giant. Do you remember, I don't know about you, but my dad would spank me once in a while if I did something not I shouldn't. And, it didn't hurt, but it was how you cry because of just the situation, right? I remember the last time he spanked me and I didn't cry. I don't know if you remember.
Were you 21?
Probably. He probably wanted to spank me when I was 21. But I remember that day. I remember what I was doing that I shouldn't have done, and I remember thinking of it as a victory, that I didn't cry, that I took it and I didn't cry. And again, it didn't hurt. It was just the idea, But I don't know if you remember a day like that when all of a sudden you felt yourself growing up and changing. So I think that's what she's talking about with this miracle of Christmas, 1886. And, it's the family tradition. Remember, Celine is 3 years older than her. So the family tradition is that they would put their shoes by the fireplace, and when they come back from midnight mass, then their shoes would be filled with presents, and Therese would, squeal, as girls do, with delight of all the things, and she would sit at her father's feet, and he would, coddle her and spoil her. And so then they come back from Christmas, and maybe her father's tired. I don't know, who knows? Who knows why we say the things we say when we say them? But he says, he sees the shoes, and he says, I hope this is the last year for this. And I'm sure all parents say that when they have to put together Christmas toys around the tree. I hope this is the last year that, let's tell them there's no Santa so that we don't have to do this anymore. And but she hears him. She hears him say this, and it's just her at this point. Celine is not doing that anymore. And so Monsieur Martin is basically saying she should be outgrowing this. This should be the last year. And but he doesn't know that she hears. And they go upstairs, and Celine tells her, don't go down, you're just going to cry. And Therese gathers herself and says, no, let's go down. She forces back her tears and goes down and delights in her presence without any tears. So she still plays the part for her father, and her father does delight in her delight, but it's time to let that go. Therese had discovered once again, and this is a quote from her, Therese had discovered once again the strength of soul which she had lost at the age of 4.5, and she was to preserve it forever. So it's that time from 4.5 to 14, when she has scruples, when she is ill, when she has crying jags. She's extremely sensitive, scrupulous, and all of a sudden, in that instant, she decides, I'm going to grow up. And with God's grace, she says, it's time for me to grow up. And she does. And she describes this as the beginning of the third period of her life. And she says that it is the most beautiful and most filled with graces from heaven. The work I had been unable to do in 10 years was done by Jesus in one instant, contenting himself with my goodwill, which was never lacking. So she knows in this 10 years that she's a little, a little much. But she conquers it with the help of the grace that she received. She experienced a great desire to work for the conversion of sinners, a desire that she hadn't felt so intently before. She experiences charity and the need to forget herself and to please others. And since then, she says, she has been happy. I think that is a significant line that she says there. She experiences charity and a need to forget herself and to please others. And since then, she has been happy. Most books that I've read on happiness say it's when you give yourself for the sake of the other is what brings happiness. The service of self for the sake of the other, not seeking anything for the self. That is the secret of happiness. So she describes what she calls her first child, the criminal Pranzini. He's a murderer, condemned to death. And for his conversion, she employs every means imaginable. She offers to God all the infinite merits of our Lord, not her merits, the infinite merits of our Lord, the treasures of the church, and she has a mass set for him. And Celine joins her in this intention because she needs Celine's help to have this mass said for Pranzini. She believes that God will pardon Pranzini, quote, even if he went to his death without any signs of repentance or without having gone to confession. I was absolutely confident in the mercy of Jesus. But I was begging him for a sign of repentance only for my own simple consolation. So she has no doubt that if Pranzini gives any sign, that God will have mercy on him. But she just wants some kind of, I wouldn't even say a sign, I would say she's looking for a indication that Pranzini has made this turn, this conversion. And her prayer is answered. At first, Pranzini refuses anything from the priest who is with him on the gallows. He's going to be, the guillotine. And at the last second, he turns and kisses the crucifix 3 times on Jesus' wounds. Then his soul went to receive the merciful sentence of God, and again, she calls him her first child. She goes on to describe this time of growing up as God was able in a very short time to extricate me from the very narrow circle in which I was turning without knowing how to come out. So she knows she was in this cycle, that she just couldn't get herself out of it. When seeing the road he made me travel, my gratitude was great. But so then it's not she herself can't get herself out of it, but God can. But I must admit, if the biggest step was taken, there still remained many things for me to leave behind. Freed from its scruples and its excessive sensitiveness, my mind developed. And so this is when she begins to study. She has a thirst for knowledge, especially for history and for science. And she calls this vanity and affliction of spirit. But she calls this desire to study vanity and affliction of spirit, and says that she spent useless time in it. She mentions the imitation of Christ, which is chapter 3, 43, and what it says about acquiring knowledge. So this is some of what the Imitation of Christ. Anybody ever read The Imitation of Christ? It's another Thomas à Kempis. It's another thing that you can read over and over again. You can read like a chapter every day and just keep reading it over and over and over again. And when you get to the end, just start back at the beginning again, because it's that kind of work. But this is what some of what that chapter in the Imitation of Christ says. Humble knowledge of self is a surer path to God than the ardent pursuit of learning. Let me say that again. Humble knowledge of self is a surer path to God than the ardent pursuit of learning. Not that learning is to be considered evil, or knowledge, which is good in itself, and so ordained by God. But a clean conscience and virtuous life ought always to be preferred. Many often err and accomplish little or nothing because they try to become learned rather than to live well. Now, like with anything, this can be taken to the extreme, and it was, because for a long time in the history of spirituality, being learned, being informed, being educated was seen as a way towards vanity and towards a puffing up of the self, rather than really just a desire to acquire knowledge to better understand God and his creation. So it goes on to say, on the day of judgment, surely, we shall not be asked what we have read, but what we have done. Not how well we have spoken, but how well we have lived. Another quote from that chapter, he is truly great who has great charity. He is truly great who is little in his own eyes and makes nothing of the highest honor. He is truly wise who looks upon all earthly things as folly, that he may gain Christ. He who does God's will and renounces his own is truly very learned. So, those are just 3 quotes, and the chapter's not very long at all. But you can see where Therese is getting this when she talks about the imitation of Christ. And the imitation of Christ at this point in her spiritual development is really the only spiritual work that she reads. She reads it so much, she carries it with her everywhere, that she can quote long passages of the imitation of Christ by heart. And so, of course she's going to be influenced. She also reads Abbe Armajon's conferences, and she says, this is one of the greatest graces of my life. So I looked up on Amazon to see if his conferences are available, and they are. And they just became available not too long ago in English. In fact, they were not available at all. The woman who translated them, I bought the Kindle edition. The woman who translated them wrote to the Lisieux Carmel thinking that they would have a copy. And the Carmel wrote back to her and said, no, it's been out of print for years and we do not have a copy. So then she found them. How did she find them? She found them in French from a French priest who had a copy. And so she took the copy and began to translate it. And then she found some other people in England who were also doing the same kind of work. And so she collaborated with them. And now we have a translation in English of his conferences. So I just started reading them. So, but they are available on Amazon.
Could you spell his name?
Yes. Abbe is like father in French, A-B-B-E. And his last name, Armijon, is A-R-M-I-N-J-O-N. I forget the name of the book, but I can look that up at the break. And so, this is one, and she describes reading these conferences as one of the greatest graces of my life. So she really grows leaps and bounds during this time in her spiritual development. And you can even see how the imitation of Christ, that one quote that I quoted, really influenced her in her little way. The one that says, let me see. He is truly great who has great charity. He is truly great who is little in his own eyes and makes nothing of the highest honor. He is truly wise who looks upon all earthly things as folly, that he may gain Christ. So, I mean, that's really kind of a part of the foundation of her little way. So you can see that all these influences, her sisters and the way that they formed her in preparing her First Communion, confirmation, the things that she's reading, the imitation of Christ, and these conferences of Abbe Armajon are all influencing her in developing her little way. And then, since the grace of Christmas, her and Celine become confidants. And she says age is no longer a separation for them, and they become not just blood sisters, but spiritual sisters. Great graces came upon them, and they grow in virtue. She receives communion as often as her confessor allows her. She doesn't ask for more than this at this time, just what he allows. She says, I didn't have the boldness I have now, for I'm very sure a soul must tell her confessor the attraction she feels to receive her God. It is not to remain in a golden ciborium that he comes to us each day from heaven. It's to find another heaven, infinitely more dear to him than the first, the heaven of our soul, made to his image, the living temple of the adorable Trinity. So she's a great advocate of frequent communion because that's the purpose. The purpose is not to leave it in a tabernacle. The purpose is not to look at it. The purpose is not to sit in front of it. The purpose is to consume it so that we become what we eat. That's the purpose. Historically, that wasn't the first purpose, but that is the purpose. She has no need of directors, she says. She doesn't need spiritual directors. She went to confession only a few times and never spoke about her interior sentiments. The way I was walking was so straight, so clear, I needed no other guide but Jesus. I compared directors to faithful mirrors, reflecting Jesus in souls, and I said that for me, God is using no intermediary. He was acting directly. So, she doesn't really have a spiritual director. Pauline encourages, and maybe that's a good thing, because, who knows which direction a spiritual director at that time would have steered her, thinking of all the Jansenistic tendencies. And they may have discouraged her in her trust and in her confidence in God's mercy. Pauline encourages her vocation to Carmel, but Marie doesn't approve because of her age, and Therese does not even tell Celine, who ends up has the same vocation. But once Celine finds out, she encourages Therese in her vocation. And she says, Celine allowed her Therese to leave, and she stayed for the glorious and bloody struggle to which Jesus had destined her as the privileged one of his love. And she's referring to caring for their father once he becomes ill. She tells her father of her vocation on the Feast of Pentecost. She wants to enter the Carmel on Christmas, the 1-year anniversary of her great grace. Her father approves, but her uncle does not. And she has to get her uncle's permission too, because he really is the guardian of those children. And he wants her to wait until she is 17. And she says this trial lasts for 3 days of her uncle refusing to discuss this. And she compares it to Mary and Joseph's anguish over losing Jesus for 3 days. It's a dark night of the soul for her. And then on the 4th day, she goes back to her uncle, and he gives his consent. This is the miracle that she had been praying for. But she says that 3 storms are still to come. The first being the superior of the Carmel does not give his approval. It says she should wait until she's 21. And he is the ecclesiastical superior, Father de la Troette. When you're 14 and you want something and you want it now, and to think, I have to wait until I'm 17. One person's telling me I have to wait until I'm 17. That's 3 years. And then somebody says 21. That's what, 7 years. So remember when you're that age, there's just no way you can wait 3 years for something. It's just, that's forever. So she goes to see this ecclesiastical superior with her father and Celine, but he still refuses. And so he's a little, what's the word I want? I don't know. Mean. Maybe a little cocky, maybe a little, So he says, hey, I'm just an ecclesiastical superior. There's one above me, the bishop. Go see the bishop. So they do. This is a period of her growing in love for God, she says. She feels within her heart certain aspirations unknown until then. And at times she had veritable transports of love. She even desires that God send her to hell so that he can be loved by someone there. I don't know. I've pondered that one. I realized this could not give him glory. since he desires only our happiness. But when we love, we experience the need of saying 1,000 foolish things. So, I don't know, could you say to God, send me to hell so that you have someone there who loves you? Ooh, I don't know. She enjoys taking care of 3 little children and teaching them about virtue and how children are soft as wax, upon which one can imprint either virtue or vice. Ah, she says, how many souls would have reached sanctity had they been so well directed? How true. As little birds learn to sing by listening to their parents, so children learn the science of the virtues, the sublime song of divine love from souls responsible for forming them. You know, and the rite of baptism says that parents are the first and best teachers of the faith. October 31st, she goes with her father to see the bishop, where she was to show the firmness of my vocation. She even puts her hair up. Do you remember reading that? She puts her hair. There's a picture of her on with her hair up. I'll have to get. I'll put together some pictures, but picture of her with her hair up, so that she looks older. And she says, God had to give 5 men a very special grace to overcome my timidity. God had to give men a very special grace to overcome my timidity. The first one that she sees when she goes to the bishop is the vicar general, Father Revanoni, who brings them to the bishop. And the bishop says that he has to speak first to the superior of the Carmel, which is Father de la Troette. So remember that she has the encouragement of Mother Marie de Gonzague. She has the encouragement of Pauline, and now of Marie, and now of Celine and her father, her uncle. So now she's trying to overcome these hurdles. They are going on a diocesan pilgrimage to Rome, where Therese plans to speak to the Holy Father about entering Carmel at 15. And this is a diocesan pilgrimage, and the Vicar General will be on that pilgrimage as well. She says, how painful it was. It seemed my future was ruined forever. The more I approached the goal, the more I saw my affairs all mixed up. My soul was plunged into bitterness, but into peace too, for I was seeking God's will. So that's where she ends the chapter. She's gone to see the bishop, and they are preparing for this pilgrimage to Rome, where her and her father and Celine will be on this pilgrimage together. So it's 10:30. Why don't we take a break? Let's say 20 of 10. Any questions? Any comments so far?
I always thought that when you're in hell, then one of the things that was your misery is because you want to be with God. You realize what you've lost, and you.
I think her point is, God, if you want someone in hell to love you, put me there.
Okay.
I'll be the one in hell to love you.
All right, I understand.
Yeah, and it was interesting because the Carmelites lent Martin a copy of the document we were talking about, the conferences.
Oh, the conferences, right.
Yeah,
He got it from the Carmel, right.
Right, because Teresa was saying, and as I do, I don't read
Right,
my father's books.
right,
So,
right. And she asked special permission to read that
yeah,
book.
yeah.
But when she looks in the paper to see what Pranzini does before he's executed, she kind of has to sneak that, because she's not allowed really to read the paper, even though Le Croix was a Catholic newspaper. I mean, it means the cross. So, but she wasn't. She really wasn't allowed to read those kinds of things. So, so she kind of has to sneak that to see what does Pranzini do before he's executed. So she's very limited in what she can read, but she kind of expands her world when she has this thirst for knowledge, and when she says she especially loves history and science. So, and I think science is an interesting thing because, this is the Industrial Revolution, where science is progressing by leaps and bounds. So somebody who is so rich in their faith is interested in science, because it leads. I think if you're steeped in your faith and you have an interest in science like physics or something, that it brings you to have more faith in God rather than the opposite. The atom, tiny thing, and yet there's a whole world in that atom. I went to the eye doctor last week, and they take pictures of your eyes, and so the doctor brought it up on the computer screen, and there was my eyeball, and it has the veins all running through it, but it was all orange and like a light seafoam green. And I said, is the computer doing that, or is that my eye? And he said, no, that's your eye. I said, well, is it different colors for different people? And he said, yeah. He said, somebody, I forget what he said, somebody with a lighter skin or a lighter eye color, comes up as this color and this color, but I have brown eyes, so mine comes up as green and orange. And I said to him, there's a whole universe in there. I was like, look at that. There's a whole, what's in there? So it's just amazing. Anyway, help yourself, get something to drink. The name of that book is The End of the Present World and the Mysteries of the Future Life. The End of the Present World and the Mysteries of the Future Life, on Amazon. All right. Any questions, any thoughts before we dive into the questions? Okay. So, where are we? Chapter 5, right? So, the first question is on page 182. When we are self-absorbed, we create our own misery. Not the truth. But when we love freely, we become blessed. Therese experienced this twofold truth at the time of her Christmas conversion. I felt charity enter into my soul and the need to forget myself and to please others. Since then, I've always been happy. God was able in a very short time to extricate me from the very narrow circle in which I was turning without knowing how to come out. How sweet is the way of love. It leaves nothing but a humble and profound peace in the depths of the heart. We all know the burden of self-absorption and the relief of being freed from our encapsulated ego. Daily life affords many opportunities for selfless giving, which is the greatest gift we can give to ourselves. Where do these opportunities exist in your life? Or we can also say, where have you practiced that consciously and realized, whoa, I feel good about myself, not because I'm such a wonderful person, but because I've given myself for the sake of someone else. Even if it doesn't have to be big things, even if it's being nice to someone in the grocery store, being nice to someone who, at the checkout, who looks miserable. I don't know. There's all kinds of examples.
When my husband passed away just about a year and a half ago, and I found that I had an awful lot of time, and it's very easy to get yourself into a bad place. So what I started to do, I live in a small community.
Mhm.
I got out our little directory and I started looking for names of people that I don't know,
Mhm.
and either sending them an email or making a phone call and requesting that can I come and visit for about an hour.
Oh.
And so I've gotten to know a lot of new people,
Mhm.
and it helped me greatly to be able to listen to somebody else, and learn from them.
Mhm.
And like you said, forget yourself for a little
So
bit.
you got out of yourself.
Yeah.
Did you get any smart answers back?
No, everybody has been very, very receptive.
Yeah? Did anybody say, thanks, but don't come and see me?
No, I didn't get any of those. I got some, maybe not next week, but maybe the following week.
Oh, okay, all right, so everybody was receptive. Right, and I think it depends on how you phrased your email, too. How many of us have sent an email and then when we reread it, wished we hadn't? Me! I've done that a few times. But you learn after a while. Or how many have received an email and said, oh, this person is going to regret sending this email. And you can blast them back, but you don't, because you know, been there, done that, and usually you do get a retraction, an apology. Sorry, it's the heat of the moment, anything like that. But yeah, anytime that you get yourself out of yourself and give yourself in any little way, like I said, it doesn't have to be grand things. You know, we're not all called to do those grand Mother Teresa things. We're not called, or the founder of the Little Sisters of the Poor, she went out and she picked up an elderly woman and put her in her own bed, and that's how she began that whole ministry to the poor elderly. Mother Teresa and what she did in India and all over the world. Well, we're not all called to do that. We're not all meant to do that, but we're meant to love like that. And we have to remember that love isn't a feeling. The kind of love that we're talking about is not a feeling, it's not an emotion, it's an act of the will. That's what love is. It's an act of the will. I choose to love this person by upholding their dignity. I remember once I was in a GNC store. It was in Concord Mall, and the young man was helping me, and he was having trouble with the cash register, and he had to call the manager over, and she just, in front of me and my mother, just threw him under the bus, tore him anew under the carpet. I mean, it was embarrassing. And I said, I can't, I don't want anything here. and I said to him, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this. And I said to her, really. And she said, well, this is the 10th time that I've had to tell him. I said, it doesn't matter to me how many times you have to tell him. He doesn't deserve to be spoken to that way. So, you can get the point across without being nasty or belligerent but it's those moments when you can really show that kind of love. It's an act of the will. I choose not to go this way I choose to go this way. I'm not going to go down the nasty road. I need to get my point across. I need to say it, but I need to say it so that, and if you look at things on like YouTube, if you look on things online or Facebook or any social media, what's the first thing that people want to do? They want to insult the person. Instead of just sticking to the issue, they want to attack the person. So, and that's, I think, is a lot of what's, or if you watch those things on YouTube, those Karens, anybody watch those things? Yeah, I watch them once in a while, and then I realize, why am I watching this? But anyway, daily life affords many opportunities for selfless giving, which is the greatest gift we can give to ourselves. Where do these opportunities exist in your life? So you have to start to look for them. They're there all the time. You just have to start to look for them. It's an awareness. You have to have the awareness of looking for them. Where can I practice this kind of love? This kind of opportunity for selfless giving? So look for them. Number 2, let's see. There is a spiritual truth contained in this image. So often our repeated efforts to overcome a fault or failing in ourselves seem futile. Then one day we wake up and discover that a change has taken place within us. The time will come when the Lord will repay us all at once, as St. Teresa of Avila puts it. So this is Teresa's talking about those long 10 years that she tried to overcome her oversensitivity. And then on that Christmas, suddenly she's got the grace to do it. So the question, how many times have you struggled to overcome a fault in your life, but have failed only to wake up one morning to discover that God had removed it? I have. I don't know if any of you have. Anybody?
Say that again.
How many times have you struggled to overcome a fault in your life, but have failed only to wake up one morning to discover that God had removed it? All of a sudden there's a change.
Recently, I've been thinking about that, and with me, I'm always a perfectionist, trying to do things just so. And it may take a lot of time to do that, but you do it. And sometimes it just doesn't work, and you get yourself down and whatever. But I've been doing that all my life. And now, I got the realization, and it was just recently, I don't have to do everything perfect. I really don't. And I could do more in less time if I didn't have to worry about this perfection. So it opened my eyes to being able to see Jesus in this, because he's telling me, John, you don't have to do this perfectly.
Right. Yeah.
I'm learning.
And also all of a sudden the grace of being released of your scruples, of realizing that we can choose to live in, as St. Paul says, the freedom of the sons and daughters of God. And what does that mean, to live in the freedom of God, in the freedom of what Christ did for us? That Christ is the one who died for our sins, for our faults. We don't have to do that. Christ did that for us. And so with that comes a freedom, that we don't merit anything. We don't accumulate merits toward our salvation. We have to work toward our salvation. And what that means is by giving oneself for the sake of the other. Yes, that's what working toward our salvation means. Always striving to love as Jesus does, to give ourselves for the sake of the other, only for the other, not seeking anything for ourselves. That's living in the freedom of God. Realizing that I'm okay if I miss a rosary today. I'm okay if I do snap at somebody. I'm okay. I acknowledge it. I give it to God, but I'm okay because I can live in the freedom of a child of God. And that's a great weight off of our shoulders, I think, when we realize that.
Yeah, and you're never too young to experience that conversion.
Right. Or too old.
Whatever is going on in your life, and it's purely accidental sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're placed in the environment where now you see this is the way it should be.
Right.
And you get exposed to prayers that I wouldn't, in my younger life, I would never, or too busy to do.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother always reminded me, if you're too busy to pray, you're too busy.
Right.
And it never really sunk in until she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I opened the Bible one day to read the Bible, and there was her saying right in the slot of the Bible. So I always remember that. But the other thing
That
too
she
is-
wrote that down
She wrote it
and put it
in
in
her own script, and she
Yeah.
had beautiful handwriting. She was one of those always cursive
Mhm.
and excellent. But as we get into more and more, and I'm exposed to more and more within the church and teaching, and when I grab a time, I'll read. Maybe Dell has a lot of books laying around. I'll grab something like that and read it. And I'm going like, well, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to read more and then so forth. But some of the simple prayers, like the surrender prayer, Jesus, the
Right.
surrender prayer.
Right.
I can't tell you, if you don't know, I work in disaster relief. And sometimes I go to a job and there's so much stuff going on, I'm going like, oh crap, this is not gonna work out at all. So, as I'm planning the day and stuff like that, and then I'm worrying about the wind, the rain and everything like that, don't you know, the weather forecast that I was looking at 3 days earlier has now totally changed, and it's gonna be a good day.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned so many times like that, just to let it go.
Right.
Just say the prayer and just let it go.
Right.
And it's enlightenment like that.
Yeah.
And what a marked difference. When I went into service, I was 20 years old. I went to Biloxi, Mississippi in 1965.
Mm-hmm.
I went down there and I had a couple of buddies that I went to school with and so forth and stuff like that. And they were black. I went down there, but a couple of black guys in our group and stuff like that. So, I said to him, you wanna go downtown? He said, man, where are you from?
Yeah.
I said, Delaware. He said, oh. And, so when I went downtown, I realized what was happening.
Yeah.
I mean, and to me, I'm in the United States military.
Right.
I'm going downtown, and blacks have to use around the back. You couldn't be in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a real eye opener.
Right.
And that was one of the things you start to say, it's a feeling. This is not right at any level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right.
I don't know these people,
Right.
but what?
It's an intuitive thing. It's a gut. It's
Right.
a gut thing.
Right.
Something's not right. Yeah.
So when you start, long and short of it, you need to be open to a change,
Mm-hmm.
and then presented with the opportunity to understand that a change should happen.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that takes time, prayer, self-awareness, self-understanding.
Right.
Yep. And I think that's where Therese is now at this point in her life. She's starting to be aware of herself in her relationship with God. So she's becoming more aware of things around her rather than focusing on just things within her. So the next question is, or have you ever worked on yourself in trying to overcome a fault, only to discover that your main fault was that you were taking yourself too seriously? That happens to me every day. Trying to overcome a fault, only to discover that your main fault was that you were taking yourself too seriously. Or that maybe God is, like St. Paul says, that thorn in his side. Lord, remove this from me. My grace is sufficient for you. That was the response that Paul got. My grace is sufficient for you. No, I'm not going to remove it, because then you'll pat yourself on the back. My grace is sufficient for you. How many times perhaps have we discovered that fault that we are struggling with so hard is really the lesson that we're supposed to learn? Or the lesson that we're supposed to learn is within that fault that we are struggling with.
I just wanted to follow up what Marty is talking about, the surrender novena, because Adele actually found that card, surrender novena, at Holy Family when we were going there. Okay, and this happened March of last year, and she told us about that, and we started praying for that. And I got that card, and I could say that changed my life 360 degree. That surrender novena, knowing that I am not in charge.
Right.
God is, and like you said, not to take yourself too seriously. That was a big thing. For me, that was really life-changing, and that had made such a big difference to me.
Right.
And I have mentioned to Adele all the time, that was the best thing that, I think the Lord leads us to Holy Family, find these cards, and then now you are here with us.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
The bishop had a lot to do with it too. So.
Yeah, thanks to him, yeah. Definitely, yeah.
I have a story. For years and years, I have been, I lived in a very messy house. I'm a very messy person. I have lots of collections, and they're all over the house, and it's clutter, clutter, clutter. So for years and years, I prayed to God, please help me with this. I can't do it myself. I can't throw anything away. Everything has a memory. Everything is, sacred to me. Well, God sent me a tornado, and I lost everything, every single thing. My house was down to the studs. I lost everything. So my house was restored to, I had to buy everything again. So, so that's what happened.
So then tell him what happened a year to the day afterwards.
It was 3 years to the day, and I was hit with another tornado. Because I bought too much stuff after the first tornado. So now, he's telling me again, he's giving me another chance to get rid of more stuff. So,
I had
if I don't learn by now.
talking about tornadoes, I was involved in that tornado April the 1st down in Greenwood, Sussex County. And went to this one house, and it was tore up. It was tore up pretty bad. The woman invited me in, and I said, "Is it safe to go in here?" She said, "I just want to show you this one thing." She brought me in this prayer room, glass cabinets, glass tabletops with children's pictures underneath it and holy cards. Wasn't touched, not a thing. No glass was broken. The curtains from the windows that blew out from the second story where it separated were looped down onto the first floor. But nothing, and now I'm going like, I don't really believe in those types of things, but when you see this, and the rest of the house was, it's torn down now.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that happens, and she was really, telling me, this is my prayer room, look at this.
Makes you wonder.
It does.
Yeah.
And those are the things that, you know, when you bump into people and through these disasters, you don't know these people from Adam. And you go in and you help whatever you can.
Right.
But when you know their backstory, where they came from, what's going on, some of these people were really, really high achievers and stuff like that. But you would never know from the way they treated their neighbors and stuff like
Right.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really, really interesting. So, like you say, you treat everybody with respect and hope you get the same way.
Yeah. Yep. Is there an area of your life in which you have an inordinate need to see the fruit of your labors and become overly discouraged when you don't? Is there an area of your life in which you have an inordinate need to see the fruit of your labors and become overly discouraged when you don't? For me, it's the parish. And not just this parish, any parish I've been in. I could say that. An inordinate need to see the fruit of your labors and become overly discouraged when you don't. Anybody else have?
Well, I mean, it's the same thing when you respond and you're trying to help someone and you really need volunteers to help because the magnitude of some of this stuff, if you see anybody that's been dealing with something, either a flood or trees down on a house or totally destroyed in it.
Right.
It's overwhelming.
Right.
And, when you wanna do so much because they need so much, and they really don't ask for all that much, just a little help to keep them moving along.
Right.
And you don't get the volunteers out, or the weather doesn't cooperate and stuff like that.
Right. Yep.
But here again, you know, you just have to say a prayer and say.
Right.
we'll
Well,
get
that's what
there
I
as
was
soon
gonna
as we
say,
can.
was that you have to just say, God, this is yours, and I give it to you, and sometimes it's a long time after that all of a sudden someone will say something to you or mention something, and you realize, oh, I had no idea. Or sometimes I feel like, well, I'm glad you got that, but I don't remember doing anything nice. Perception has a lot to do with it, I think.
No, I don't think people talk about the concept of forgiveness enough, because it took me 50 years to really understand what forgiveness was. Forgiveness is not, and this is what I try to teach my kids, is not forgive and forget.
Right.
Because you're never gonna forget
Nope.
what happened or what they did or whatever, the situation. But if God can forgive through confession, well, I guess I could too. But I couldn't wrap my head around that.
Right.
For the longest time. And because of the anger and because of, stuff that I've done and stuff that they've done or whatever, you just can't break out.
Right, it's a cycle. You're in a cycle.
You're in a cycle.
Yeah.
But then once after, I said it took me 50 years to finally get, oh, that's what that is. Once you get the concept of forgiveness and you just choose to do it.
Right.
Through prayer.
Again, it's an act of the will.
It's an act of the will. Wow.
It's not a feeling.
Your life just, you wake up the next day.
Yeah.
And it's like a whole new start.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, forgiveness is not, okay, I choose to forgive, the rest of your life. No. You tend to have to forgive every day.
Oh, yes.
Over, 2 times a day. You have to continue to forgive because there's always,
Yeah, forgiveness is like conversion. We have to do it over and over and over and over again.
Wow, you're free to do anything, to go anywhere from there.
Right.
And that concept is lost on people. Well, what do you mean? Because you're still holding on.
Right. And prayer has a lot to do with that too.
Exactly.
Praying for the person or the situation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And not pray that a lightning strikes them.
No.
That-
No, no, no.
out their car around the tree. That's, change the prayer. Change the
Right,
prayer.
right. And it may be that you come to the realization that I can't have a relationship with this person,
Yes.
but I can also choose not to wish them any ill will,
Yes.
and that they go on with their life as best as they can, just like I'm trying to go along with mine as best as I can.
But it's amazing, you'll wake up the next day and your whole
Right.
outlook has completely changed.
Right.
And people are like, what?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Times and times.
Yeah.
Every time you say the Our Father in church, it comes to the point where, my sins are forgiven, like forgive others. I go, I'm forgiven, but what about this way?
Right.
So I think about that, when I think that, well, that's what I gotta do. It's not
Right.
easy, you go,
Yeah, it's not just a vertical thing, it's a horizontal thing too.
Yeah.
It's vertical or horizontal, it's
Yeah.
all directions.
I say that to myself, okay, I'm forgiven, but now
Yeah,
now the hard part comes in.
yep. So there are a lot of questions in this chapter. So let's do number 3. Let's see, what is she talking about? Leaving her father and going to the bishop. Have you ever found yourself trying to influence or manipulate a person's choice to fit your need? Sure. I don't want to go to that restaurant. Have you ever found yourself trying to influence or manipulate a person's choice to fit your need? Or let's even say, just to manipulate a person's choice, not necessarily to fit your own need. Parents telling their children that they shouldn't study this particular thing, they should study this particular thing. I knew people like that in college who really wanted to study one thing, but their parents would not allow them to study that because it wouldn't make them any money. I don't know. Have you ever found anything like that yourselves?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've had the power to exert undue influence over the life direction of another? How many of you are parents? Yeah. If you are a parent, how do you differentiate offering your children advice and guidance from imposing your dreams upon them? Yep. I have a cousin who has 3 children, and her oldest is very intelligent. You know, he's studying computers now or something. I don't know what he's studying. And when I talk to him, I still don't know what he's studying. So, but when he was a kid, when he was a little kid, you know, I guess he wanted to play soccer. You know, all the kids want to play soccer. So she signed him up for this soccer team, and I guess he was awful. And so after the game, I guess the first game, he's in the car and he says, "Mom, I did so well. I'm really good at that. I did so well." And she said, "No, you didn't." His name is Luke, and she said, "Luke, you suck at lots of soccer. You can't play soccer. That's not your thing. It's not going to be your thing. You're terrible at it. We'll find you your thing, but it's not that." But, you know, it's just being honest, and I think he was grateful that he didn't have to play soccer, actually. So, but, you know, she could have said, "Oh, well, all the other kids are playing soccer. You're going to play soccer because all the other kids are playing soccer." And that's what kids do now. They play soccer. So, but she didn't. So that's it for the questions. Any other thoughts or Next week, we're here, and then the following week, that first Tuesday of November, we do not have class because I have Mass at the nursing home on the first Tuesday of the month. So then we're here next week, and then it'll be 2 weeks. So we'll continue with chapter 6. Next is the trip to Rome, and the 3 months of waiting. Then I would like, next time we get together, maybe I'll do this, is I want to give you something else to read as we get closer to her oblation, to divine mercy, to merciful love. I want to give you St. Bernard of Clairvaux. I think I found a kind of like a shortened version of his, his treatise called, it's on love and the different levels of how we love God. Like we love God because God gives us something. And then the last one is we love God for God's own sake. So I want to just kind of review that a little bit in light of her her oblation to merciful love, which, you know, when she makes that discovery that her vocation is love. All right? Thank you all.